Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to build a Kanban board that looks just like this. So what this allows you to do is create tasks, move them around, reorder the columns, reorder the tasks, delete some things, and the data persists. So if I log out and log in as a different user, say React.js, log in, we see I have a different board. But if I go back to the original user, which was FastAPI, we can see it has a state that I left off with. So I'm going to be building this in FastAPI, React. I'm going to use a little bit of Docker Compose to generate a Postgres database. So if you're interested in any of those things, then I think you'll like this video. It's going to be a long video, so I have the link to the code in the description below. I'll also have chapters for the video, so you can skip to certain sections if you want. But basically, this is what we'll be building in the video. It's going to take about 3 hours or so. But you can follow along. It's going to be pretty ugly, but it's going to work just like we expect the Kanban board to work. And you'll have user accounts so you can log in and save user information. So if you're ready, let's get started on this Kanban board. To start with this project, I have an empty directory and my VS Code is open. So what I'll do is I'll create a directory here. I'll start with the backend. So create backend, and then I'm going to create a virtual environment here. So Python venv, I'll call this env. Start it up. And then I'll just install some things. So I want FastAPI, I want UVI corn. I also want Tortoise ORM with the async PG extension. I think that's how you spell it. Yeah, and then I'll also need the psychopg2 binary for my system. This might just be psychopg2 for your system. So pip install psychopg2-binary. That should be it. And then what are some other things that I think I need for this? I need some password hashing. So I'll install passlib. So pip install passlib. And then I want bcrypt using passlib. And then finally, the thing I can remember has to do with the forms. So Python, or not Python, but pip install Python multipart. And I need JSON web tokens. So pip install pyjwt, I think it is. Okay, and if I need anything else, then I'll just install it when I get to that point. So inside of backend, I've installed the things that I need for now. So I'll create a file called main.py. This is where all the code will live. Not too much code in our backend, so I've decided to put it all in one file. And here I'll just start up an app. So from FastAPI, import FastAPI, and then I'll create the app object. And then to test this, I'll create a single endpoint. So app.get/board. So eventually this will return the data for the board, but for now it's just going to return nothing, just so we can see it working. So I'll call this get board, and then I'll return, say, board, and then an empty dictionary. So I think this is it. So I'll start this up. So UVI corn, and then my file name is main, and then the app object inside that is app. So main:app, and I'll just turn on reload, and I'll go to this endpoint. So let me just copy this. And I should go to docs. And here I see /board. And if I try it out and execute, I should get that empty board that I just created. So this is almost all we need for the backend, but one additional thing I want to do is I want to return some board data. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm going to go to the front end next, and then I want to create the visual board based off the data of the Kanban board. So what I'll do here is I'll just create a variable called board data. And this is a good opportunity for me to explain what the data will look like throughout the app. So this is both on the front end and the back end, and it's going to be stored in the database all in the same format. So the board data, a board is going to be a dictionary or an object, depending on how you look at it. On the front end, it's an object. On the back end, it's a dictionary. And inside of this dictionary, there will be 3 keys. So there's going to be a tasks key. There's going to be a columns key. And then there's going to be a column order key. And this is going to be a list. So the reason why I have it like this is because it makes it a lot easier to work with on the front end. So on the back end, it doesn't really make a difference how it's set up. But on the front end, to avoid mutating the board data, it's easier to have objects inside of here, so dictionaries instead of lists. So the typical way that I would think about this is I would have a bunch of columns, and then for each column I have a bunch of tasks. So if I have like columns as a list, and then inside that list I have column objects, and then inside the column objects I have tasks, that makes a lot of sense in terms of how to structure the data. It's the first structure that I think of. But it's very difficult to update, as you would find out if you were trying to use that data structure in JavaScript, that is. In Python, it's pretty easy. But if I have all objects, basically, and this column order is pretty simple, but if these 2 are objects, then it becomes much easier to update. So I'll show you what this task object looks like next. So inside of tasks, each key is going to be the ID of the task. So we can say task 1 is equal to, this should be another object or a dictionary. So this is going to have an ID, and it's going to have some content. So the content for this first one, I'll say it's create video. And then the ID for this is going to be the same as the key. So this doesn't necessarily need to happen, but once again, it just makes it a little bit easier to work with on the front end. So duplicating the data here isn't that big of a deal. Simpler code in a more complicated data structure is better than a simple data structure in really complicated code, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to create another task. Let me just move this over. So task 2. And this will have ID task 2, and then the content will be, let's say, edit video. And then task 3 is going to have an ID. Oh, this should be a colon. And then the content for this will be publish video. Okay, so those are the 3 tasks that I'm going to have on my board. Next, I'll focus on the columns. So I'll have 2 columns. So just like the task, the key will be the column ID. So column 1. And the value will be another dictionary. This one has 3 keys, so I'll put it on multiple lines. So it's going to have an ID, which is going to be the same as the key. And then it has a title. So for this one, I'll call it to do. And then finally, it has a list of task IDs. So I'll say task IDs here, and then it's going to be a list. So the task IDs are simply from up here. So for the to do column, I'll have task 2 and task 3 as a task for this. And then I'll create the second column. So column 2. And in here, I'll have ID, column 2, and then title, I'll call this done. And then task IDs, we'll just have task 1 here. Okay. And then finally, I need the column order. So this just tells me what order my columns are in. So this should be column 1 comes first, and then column 2 is second. And then I just want to return this. And let's see, I have an error. This should be closed off with a quote. And now if I execute this again, we see I get the data that I want. And if I made a mistake here, I'll fix it once I get to the front end part, because I will know what those errors are. But so far it looks like it's fine. Next, I'll create the front end with create React app. So npx and then create React app. and then the folder will be called Frontend. So I'll just let that install. Okay, so it's done installing. So I'll cd to Frontend and then just use npm start. And I'll go over to my browser, and then this is on port 3000. And I can see this. So as long as you can see this, then you know everything installed correctly. So now what I want to do is I want to go back, and I just want to remove the things that I don't need. So let me open up Frontend here. I can close main for now. And inside of source, I just want to get rid of everything except for index.js. This is going to just use that file, and then I'll create more for my components. So delete permanently here. Let me just make sure I didn't select anything extra. Yeah, so I just need index.js. And then another thing I want to do before I forget is in package.json is I want to add a proxy here. So what this will allow me to do is not set up cores on my FastAPI app. So what's going to happen is any requests that the front end doesn't understand, it's going to automatically forward to the back end. And I can do that by setting a proxy down here. So proxy. And then I can just say localhost 8000. So that's where my FastAPI server is running. So like I said, anything that it doesn't understand, it will just forward over to localhost port 8000, and then FastAPI can take care of it. Because when I'm sending requests like to get the board, I want to send that to FastAPI, and I can just reference it in the JavaScript without having to put the port or anything like that. So that should be it for the package.json. And let me just remove that. And then let me go back to index.js, and I'm going to remove the things that I don't need. So I don't need this CSS file because I won't have it. I'm not going to have an app component. I'm not going to use the report web vitals. I'm not going to use strict mode. So let me get rid of that and leave the comma. Okay, so I think that's all I need there. And then I'll create the app component again. So function app, don't need any props for this. And then I'm going to just return for now a div that says hello. And now let me see if I can see that. Yeah, we see hello up here, so we know that didn't cause any problems. So now let me install some things that I will need. So npm install. I know I need React Beautiful DND. So this is what's going to allow me to actually drag and drop things. So I'll install that. And I'm also going to need a React router. And then I need style components. So let me just wait for this to install. So npm install React router DOM. And then I'll install styled components. Okay, so those things are installed. Just like with FastAPI, if I forgot something, then I'll just install it later. But those are the only things I can think of for now. So now I'll start working on my first component. So I'll make a directory called components in the source directory. So components. And then inside of here, I'm going to create my first component, and this will be the board component. So my main component for this app. And I'll go ahead and open it up. And then in here, I'm going to import React. And I already know I'm going to use state and use effect. So I'll import those from React. And then I also want to import styled from styled components. I'll use that in just a second. And I want to create the function for the component. So board, it's going to take in some properties. And then I want to return something, which I'll make in a second, but I can export default board here. Okay, and that something is I want to create a container. So this board is going to have a bunch of columns, and I want them to all be on the same line. So I'm going to set the display to this container that I'm going to create for the board to a flex. So const container. So I'm creating a new component based off styled.div and then backticks. And then I want this to be display flex. So style components are just a way to create components based off of regular HTML elements, and then you can add some CSS to them. So I'm just taking a div and adding display flex to it, and I'm calling it container. So then inside of here, I can use container like this instead of using div. Right. So now I just want to put board there. And what I want to do is I'll go to the index and I'll import that board. So import board from, this should be, I think, components / board. And instead of having hello here, I'll just return, I'll leave the divs and I'll return board like this. So board. And now I'll start up and I'll make sure I can see this and there are no errors. Okay, so we see board up here, so I know the board component is working. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to get that data from my backend. So let me open up the main.py again. So I have this one endpoint / board and I have this data. I want to bring this data into my front end so I can use it. I'm going to use this data to generate the actual board. And the idea is once I'm done, of course, this data will come from the user and it's going to update as the user makes changes to their board. But for now, it's just going to be the static data and later it's going to be able to change. So in here, I'm going to start with the state. So the first thing I want to do is I want to define what an empty board looks like. And this just makes it easy so I don't accidentally save an empty board later. So what I'll do is I'll call this initial data, not date. And it's just going to be empty. So remember, I have tasks as an object. I have columns as an object, and I have column order as an array. So that's what an empty board looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the state to be that empty board. So here I'm defining the state and the set state. I'll call this board. So board and set board. And I'm going to use state, the hook use state, and I'm going to set it to initial data to begin with. So I'm going to set it to be the empty board. And now I want to use effect to load this board when I first start the app or first load the page really. So use effect, and then I'll create an anonymous function in here and put it down there. And then the second argument to use effect is an array of the things that you want to control the update for this. So if it's empty, like I'm going to leave it here, then this will only fire once. It's only going to fire when the page first loads. If I have something else in here, then it will fire every time that thing changes. But since I have nothing in here, it will only run once. So this is for loading the data initially to the page, because once I get the data from the backend, then the front end will manipulate the data. And then when I want to save it, I'll send it back. But I don't need to get it unless I'm loading the page for the first time, because the front end does most of the work with this. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to create a function to get this. So async function, and I'll call this fetch board. And this function is going to obviously fetch the board. So const response equals, this is going to be await, and then fetch. And I'm fetching on /board. And then I don't need to pass any additional information to fetch because it's just a plain GET request. So I'm going to wait for this. And then once it comes back, I'm going to get the data. So const data await response.json. So just have to await converting it to JSON as well. And what I'll do is I'll console.log the data so we can see it. And I'll return data.board, right? Because in my backend, I have the keyboard. So I'm returning data.board. And then in the use effect, I'm going to call that function. So fetch board. And this returns a promise. So then board, and I'm going to use set board like that. I probably need a better key. I'll use data. Okay, so set board, and it's setting the data that gets returned from fetch board into here. So on the first run, this will be set to initial data, and then it's going to fire off this fetch and get the board data, and it's going to set it to our board state. So let's just make sure that this runs. So let me go over to the browser, and I'll open up the console, and it looks like it reloads automatically. So it already loaded the board. So we see here object board, and then we have the board inside, and we have the data. So column 1, column 2. And then the task, we have task 1, 2, 3. So all that is working as expected. So I can get rid of this. And now we can start working on displaying our board. So I'll create a new component, and I'll call this column. And I'll go over to here, and I'll just start the basic things for a component. So import React from React. And then I know I need style components. So import styled from style components. Okay. And then I can just create the CSS for the column. So const, this will be similar to the idea that I did in the board where I'm creating a container. So I can have it styled a certain way. This is not going to look very good. It's just going to make it easy to read. So it's not supposed to be beautiful. So I'm going to give this container some margin. Let's say 8 pixels. Going to give it a border 1 pixel, solid, black. Let's see, a border radius 2 pixels. I want it to have a width, say a width of 200 pixels. This will be display flex as well for the task items and the things that I'm going to put inside the column, like the add new button in the title. The flex direction for this won't be row, it's going to be column. I want to align the items center, and then I want to have some padding at the bottom for the button because I know I'm going to need that. And I think that's it. So I can close that out. And I have my container for my column. And I also know I want a title, so I'll just create a title. And for this, I'll give it some padding, let's say 5 pixels. And that's it for the title. Okay, so I can create the actual components. So column, props, and I'm going to return that container for now, and I'll fill it in a bit later, and I'll export defaults column. Okay, and let's just put the title in the container because I know I'll need the title. So title, and this title is going to come from the props. So props dot let's see, column dot title, right? Because looking at my data model, I have, so I'm going to get past this, a column object. So props.column will be this whole thing. And then, well, actually this whole thing. And then dot title will be the title. Okay, yeah, so that's what I want. So now I'll go back to the board and I'll import that column in the board. So import column. And this should go inside of here. So what I want to do is I want to create a column for every column that I have defined in my board state, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map over everything. So first I'll start with board dot column order, right? Because I want to generate these in the correct order. So I'm basically mapping over this array of column order. So map, and it's going to have the column ID associated with it. And for later purposes, I'll use the index. And then I'll create this arrow function inside of here. Inside of here, I want to get the actual column object associated with the column ID. So I'll create a variable const and I'll say column equals, and then board.columns, and I'm getting the column associated with that ID. So column ID. So like I said, this makes it really easy to work with when you have a bunch of objects in the data instead of lists. So I can just get it by key. So board.columns, column ID will get me the column. And then I can also do tasks. So basically I can start with the column and I can get the task IDs. And what I want to do is I want to return an array of the task objects. So I can call map here, take the task IDs. So this task IDs here is a list of strings, or an array of strings. So if you go back here, task IDs is an array of strings. So this task ID is each string. And what I want to do is I want to return the task object. So I have to go inside of the task object and return that. So board.tasks and pass in that task ID. So once I have these two things for the column, so I have the actual column and I have all the tasks for that column, I can return the column component. So column that I just imported, and I'll give it a key of column ID. So column.id. I'll give it the column that I just retrieved. So column like that, the column object. I'll pass the tasks for this particular column. And then I'll pass the index as well. Because like I said, I need this for the drag and drop functionality. So that should be it for that. But I see I have an error somewhere. Let's see. I feel like I'm not returning something. So that's the map. Oh, I need to put this inside of curly brackets because it's JavaScript inside of the JSX. Okay, so I'll just format it like this. Okay, say everything compiled successfully. And I think I should be able to see this now because I'm passing the column and then each column is displaying the title. So if I go over here, I should see two, right? Because I have two columns. I have to do and done. So let's go over and I see that I have to do and done. And just looking at this, I think I want the title to be something else. So I think I have it as a div. I'll make this an H3. And yeah, that looks a little bit better. So to do and done, these are my two columns that I need to display. So now inside of column, what I want to do is I want to return all the tasks for a particular column. So what I can do is I'll create another container element. I can't call it container, so I'll call this one task list. So task list, and this will be a div. So styled .div and then backticks for the CSS. And I just want some padding on here. So padding 8 pixels and like that. Okay, so I have this component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the tasks inside of here. So this is going to be pretty similar to what I just did for the board when it came to the columns, but this time I want to do it for the tasks. So I can take the column, so props.column. Actually, not the column. I want to take the tasks and I want to map over them. So this is going to have task IDs. Well, actually, no task ID. I'm mapping over an array of task objects. So just the task in the index, and I'll create the function here. And for each one, I'm just going to return a task component, which I'll create in a moment. So I'll return a task, and then the key is going to be a task.id. The task is going to be task. So the task object, I need index. And then I should pass the column ID as well. So this will be props.column.id, right? And then I can close this out. Yeah, so what this is doing is mapping over my task list, and it's going to return an array of tasks. Right, so I think that's what I want. This seems like it's fine. I really don't need the curly brackets here because it's returning one thing. And I think that's it. Right? So now what I'll do is I'll create a new component called task.jsx. I'll import React. And then I'll also, do I want to do anything for styling here? Yeah, thinking about it, I'm going to need another kind of container. So styled from style components, and then I'll create a container. So container equals style.div. And then I want this to have a border. So border 1 pixel solid black. Border radius. So this is going to be pretty similar to the column container. So 2 pixels. I'll give it some padding, say 8 pixels. And then I'll give it some margin at the bottom of 8 pixels so they don't stack right on top of each other. And then the background color, just to make sure it doesn't appear transparent, I'll make it white. And I think that's it. I think that's all I'll need. So I'll create the actual component. So this takes in some properties, and I'll return that container. And once again, well, I think I just need the content. So I have the props.task and then the content for that task. Then finally, I can export this. So export default task, and then I can import it here. So import task, right? So I think I should be able to see everything. So let's go over here, and I do. So I see edit video, I see publish video, I see create video, right? So these are the tasks. So in the initial data that I set up in FastAPI, I put edit video and publish video under to do, and then I've already created the video here. So these are the 2 columns. So obviously when I click on these things, nothing happens because I haven't enabled the drag and drop functionality yet, but that's what I'm going to implement next. So obviously the idea is to be able to take one of these tasks and drag it over to here, or take one of the titles and drag it over so it rearranges the columns. Okay, so to get started with the drag and drop functionality, the first thing I need to do is I need to import something called the drag drop context from the library. So drag drop context from React Beautiful D&D. And what this drag drop context is for is it basically sets the area that allows me to drag and drop things. So this is like the outermost container. So I can take this and I'm going to wrap the container with this. So this is my board, and I'm going to wrap my board with this drag drop context. And here, so I'll just move that. So the drag drop context takes one thing. Well, it has one required argument that you have to pass to it, and that's a function called onDragEnd. So onDragEnd, and this is going to be a function I'm going to create in just a moment, and I'll call it onDragEnd. But the idea is whenever something finishes being dragged around in this drag drop context, it's going to fire off this callback onDragEnd, and that allows me to actually do something with the information that I receive from that. So basically it tells me what was moved and where it was moved to. So here I'll create a function. So onDragEnd. And for now, I'll just alert dropped. So this is just going to pop up an alert when I drag and drop things so you can see it working. And I have drag context. It should be drag drop context. So drag drop context like that. So let's see if that works. And it's complaining about the closing component. Yeah, because I didn't change the name. Okay. So now within the drag drop context, I need to set my first droppable area. So a droppable area simply means an area that you can drop something into. And then of course, later I'll have something called a draggable. So a draggable is a thing that can be moved and dropped into a droppable area. So I need to import up here, droppable. And I'm going to wrap my container again in droppable. So I'm going to have two droppable areas for this. One droppable is going to be this outside area here. So just imagine all this empty space here. This allows me to move the columns around. And then inside of each column, I'll have a droppable area to move all of the tasks around. So that's why I want to put the first droppable around the container. So droppable like that. And then I'll put the other side of it here, and I'll just indent this. Okay, so droppable here. I need a droppable ID. So the droppable ID. So this is for when I want to know what's been moved and where it's been moved to. I need to know that this has been moved to the columns. So I'll call this all columns. And then you can set a direction on this. So do you want to have this drop work horizontally or vertically? So for the columns, I want them to be movable in the horizontal direction, but for the task, it's going to be vertical. So I can set the direction here and I'll say horizontal. And then I can give this a type. So in addition to having the droppable ID, I can have the type for all the things that can be dropped in here, and I'll just call this column. So the types of things that will be dropped inside of this component here will be columns. And the way that this works is inside of here, you have to return a function. So right now I just have the container component with the stuff inside, but really I need to have this be a function. So this is going to be a function with one argument, and you can call this provided. So by provided, I mean the things that are provided by the droppable. And the reason why this is important is because I need to put these things on properties of the things that I want to drag and drop. So let me move this closing curly bracket to here. So to make sure it matches up. And then I'm going to return this container component. So let me just put the parentheses there. Okay, so this is going to return the container component now. And inside of here, I can put these properties on the container. So to do that, I'm going to spread this. So I'm just going to take provided dot droppable props, right, and just spread that on containers. So container is going to take on all of the properties from provided dot droppable props. And also this needs to have a reference. So provided dot inner ref. So this is just so all the drag and drop stuff can work. I don't need to reference this directly. So now this will allow me to drag things around this particular container. So now that I have this droppable area, I want to have a draggable area. So the draggable in this case is going to be the column. So what I can do is I can import draggable. So draggable. And this is from React Beautiful D&D. And kind of in a similar way, I want to wrap this around what can be dragged. So if I go down here, this container represents an entire column. So I can use droppable, or not droppable, draggable. Did I import droppable again? No. I think I'll need droppable later, but for now I'll just use draggable. So need draggable here, and I'll wrap the entire container with it. and indent this. And just like the board, it's going to require a function. So here, provided again, and I'll move this outside the container, and I'll move this outside the container. Okay, so it's going to return this container. And similar to what I just did here, I need to spread the draggable props this time. So I'll spread the provided dot draggable props. And then once again, I'll have a reference. So provided dot inner reference. Okay. And then the last thing that I need is a place where I can grab it. So to set the place where I grab it, I need to spread the drag handle props somewhere. So in this particular case, I want to be able to grab the title and move it around. So I'll take the provided drag handle props and I'll spread it on the title. That makes it to where I can select the title and move things around. So I think that should be enough to get this working. So let's try it out. So if I put my mouse over to do, it turns into the hand, meaning I can drag this. So I'll just click and it doesn't work. So it has the hand, but it doesn't have the ID. So yeah, I forgot the draggable ID just looking at the error message here. Yeah, so the draggable, just like the droppable, it's similar. I need some properties. So draggable, I have a draggable ID. And for this one, I want the draggable ID to be the column ID. So props.column.id. And then it needs to have the index. So that's why I use the index before. So props.index. And then I can't think of anything else. So I think that's all it needs. So let me go over here and then I can now drag and drop things. So let me give this a background color of white really quick. So background color white. And now, yeah. Okay. So we see this. Okay, I'm not able to drag to do. Only done. So let's see why that's not working. So we have the draggable here for each column. So let me just make sure I'm not accidentally providing the wrong information. So yeah, looking at this, there's one thing I forgot. I need the placeholder for this. So I need like an extra space to allow me to drop things. So I think this is it. So this should go right above the closing container tag. So provided dot, what is this, placeholder? Yeah. So I have to put the placeholder right before the end. So now, okay. So now I can drag and drop both sides. Okay. And it alerts me every time it's dropped. So that's what I want for the columns. Now I want to be able to do the same thing for the individual tasks. So I need to do something similar to what I just did. So I'll go over to my column, and just like I did with the columns, I want to put a droppable area around the task list. So inside the container for the column, I'm going to have a droppable area for the task list so they can be moved around. So I need to import droppable now. So droppable. And I want to put this around task list. So droppable. And it's going to have the droppable ID. And the droppable ID for this can just be the column ID, right? Yeah, so I have the column ID for the draggable, but since this is a droppable, I can use the column ID again because they're two different things. So props.column.id. Then I need that inner reference. So provided dot inner ref, just like that. And this has the matching closing tag, so slash droppable. And just so I don't forget this time, inside of the, well, let's see, this is going to return a function, right? So let's see, provided, and it's going to return this task list. Let me just take this parenthesis, move it down here. So draggable is going to return that. And just so I don't forget, I need that provided before the end of task list. So we could just do provided. And then what is this? Placeholder. So I have space to move them around. And now I can go over to the task component and set it up there. So this is going to be a draggable. And what I want to do is I want to put the draggable around the container for the task list. So draggable, and it's going to have some props. So once again, I'll have an ID in the end. So draggable ID, I'm going to have the ID. So props.task.id, and it's going to have an index here. So props.index. I'll put the closing tag after the container, indent this. And then remember, this has to return a function. So provided, and then move these to the other side. Okay. And then I need to spread the draggable props on container. So provided draggable props. And I also want to drag the drag handle props here because I'm going to grab just the entire task. There's not going to be like a title or anything that I can grab. So I can just grab the entire task. So I can spread the drag handle props as well. And then I need the reference. So provided inner ref. So now let's see if this works. I can't grab them yet, so I forgot something here. Let's see. So we have the draggable here. Has the draggable ID. We have provided. We're spreading the draggable props and the drag handle props and the inner reference. Okay, everything looks fine here. Let me take a look at this again. So I have the placeholder, which really wouldn't affect it. And I have the task list. Oh, I forgot to spread the values over here. Yeah, so this reference should be on the task list, not the droppable. So let me move that here. And then this should have a type for the droppable area, right? Because this droppable has a type, yes. So this type should be task. And then let's see here, I'm going to have the props. So I can spread the provided dot droppable props. Where is it? So provided dot droppable props. Yeah. Okay. So let's try that. You just refresh. Okay. So I can move the task around. Obviously, when I drop it, it doesn't stay, and that's for a specific reason. But I can move things around, and I can move the columns around. So that's exactly what I want. Okay, so now we can handle those drags. So I can go over here on dragon, and this is going to take some results. And what I'll do is I'll get the 4 things I want out of here. So it's going to give me 4 things. It's going to give me a destination first. So destination. It's going to give me a source. So this is the ID where it's coming, or actually where it's going to, the ID of the droppable area that it's going to. This is the ID of the droppable area that it's coming from. And then it gives me the draggable ID. So that's the thing that's being dragged. And then it gives me the type. So remember, I put type on the column here, and I put type task. So this gives me all the information that I need to kind of update my state to reflect the new state of the board. So the reason why I can't just drag and drop things is because I'm dealing with state here. The drag just tells me where I'm going, and it's up to me to update the state to reflect the new locations. All right, so these 4 things are the things that I'll need. And in here, I can do some simple things for the easy cases. So I can say, if there's no destination, I just want to return because there's nothing to do. If I pick up an element, like if I pick up an element and put it right back, then there's nothing to do. Likewise, if the element doesn't go anywhere, so these are similar situations, like I move it around, but it doesn't go anywhere, or like I just touch it and it doesn't go anywhere, I don't want to do anything. So I can say destination, droppable ID. So the destination is the object here for the droppable. And I'll just say if it's equal to the droppable ID for the source, and if the same thing for the index. So the source index. So if these two things are the same, then I want to return, which means like don't do anything for this particular situation. So now under this is where I can handle updating the state for the case where something was actually moved. So I'll start with the column. So I'll look at the type. So first I'll say if type is equal to column, I want to do something here. So what I want to do is I want to get the information from the state. So get the objects associated with it. I'm basically making a copy. I'm getting the objects. I'm going to update the order in these new objects that I'm manipulating. And then I'm going to update the state with these new objects. So I'm not mutating the state. I'm making copies from the state. I'm mutating the copies, and then I'm updating the state with these copies, right? And this goes back to the beginning when I talked about the structure of the data. The reason why I structure it in that way is because it's very easy to update and do the things that I'm about to do here. If I had like a bunch of lists, then it'd be very difficult to update. So the first thing I want to do is when it comes to a column, I want to know what the new column order is. Well, I want to update the column order. So first I need to get the existing column order. So I'll just call this new column order, and it's going to be a copy of the old one. So array.from and then board.column order. So this is just going to the states that I have defined and grabbing the column order. So just to refresh your memory, column order down here. I'm just grabbing this out of the state. So next thing I want to do is I want to update this column order. So I have this column order, and in this case I have 2 columns, but imagine I had 10 columns. I want to be able to update that. So it's in order. So the first thing in this array will be the first column, the second thing will be the second column, and so on. So if I'm going to rearrange things, I first need to know where it's coming from so I can kind of take it out. So if, let's say I have 10, I want to take out the 5th element. So I'll just remove that, and then I need to update the place where it's going. So first I'll take it out. So new column order dot splice and source.index. So the reason why I have an index on there is because that tells me the order. So I'm going to splice. I'm going to take the index, and the second argument to splice in this case when you want to remove something is the number of things you want to remove starting from this index. So starting from this index, I want to remove one thing. So this takes out the column from the column order of the place where I just dragged from. And then I want to update this to reflect the new order. So I'll use splice again. And this time I'm going to start from the destination index. And then I don't want to remove anything, but I want to add something. So I want to add the draggable ID. And remember the draggable ID in this case, where is it? For column, draggable. So the draggable ID here is the column ID. So I'm just taking that column ID and I'm putting it inside of the new column order. So it's still going to have the same format. And then once I do that, I can update the state of the board to have the new column order. And I don't have to touch the columns directly because I didn't change anything about the columns. I just changed the order. So looking down here, I'm just changing this order. There's nothing about the columns that I'm changing. Like the title is the same, the tasks for that column are the same, and obviously the ID is the same. So there's nothing that needs to be done here. And then for the tasks, obviously I'm not changing the tasks. I'm only changing the order. So if I go back to board here, what I can do is I can set the new state. So set board. And what I want to do is I want to spread the existing board over. Right? And then I want to update just the column order. So this just takes everything that's in board and puts it in here. And then I want to update the new column order. So column order. And then it's going to be this new column order. And I think that's it. And I can just return from here because I won't have to go any further. So if this works, then I should be able to visibly rearrange the columns. So let's see. So I'm starting with done. Let me just close this. Starting with done, move it over, drop it, let go, and it's done. So It still doesn't work for the task because I haven't written the code for that, but it works for the columns. So I can now rearrange the columns however I want. So I'm going to do some similar code for the tasks, but it's going to be a little more complicated because for the tasks, what I have to do is I need to go inside of the column and then update the order here. So let's go back to the board. And now I want to think of really the two main cases for dragging tasks. So one case is I want to be able to drag tasks within the same column. And another case is I want to be able to drag a task from one column to another, right? So I'm going to do something if it's in one column, and I'm going to do something different if I'm moving from one column to another. So what I'll do is I'll get the columns that I'm working with. So I'll create two variables, start and finish. So board.columns, and I want to get the column for the source droppable ID. So droppable ID. And the same thing for finish. So board columns and then destination dot droppable ID. So the reason why I'm doing this here is because in the case where it's type task, so if it's type column, this code gets run and it returns. So if it's not type column, it has to be task because I only have two types. So here, what it's doing is getting the droppable ID for the task move. So the droppable ID for tasks are always columns. So this will be a column ID, and then I can get the column out of here. So I'm getting the starting column and the finish column. And then what I want to do is I want to check if they're equal. So if they're equal, I'll do one thing, and if they're not equal, I'll do another. So if start equals finish, I'm going to handle the move for moves inside of a single column. And then after this, I'll handle the case for moving between columns. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the tasks, the task list from the column. So if you look here, I want to get the task IDs. And this order here determines the order that they display. So this is going to be pretty similar to the column order. So let me go back to the board, and I want to get that. So const, and I can say new task IDs. It's going to be array.from, and I'm just taking the task IDs from the column. So I call this start. It can be either start or finish because they're equal, but I'll just use start. And I want to get the task IDs from that. So once I have the task IDs, then I want to update the order. So this is going to work just like the column. So I can say new task IDs dot splice. And what I want to do is I want to start from the source index. I want to remove one thing. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll start from the source, or not this source, but the destination index. I don't want to update anything, but I want to put in the new draggable ID, which is the task ID. So draggable ID there. So this looks just like the code here. And then what I need to do is I need to first update the column, and then I need to update the key here. So first I need to update the task IDs, and then I need to update the column in the state. So I can do that by doing this. So I can say new column. So I'm going to take the column that I started with and just make a copy of it. So to do that, I'm going to spread start. So this is just copying the start column. And then the only thing I want to update in the column are the task IDs. And then I'm going to put in new task IDs here. So this is just copying the original column. I'm creating a new column out of it. I'm adding all of the information, and I'm overriding the task IDs with the new task IDs here. So this has the new order. So now I can update the overall state of the board. So set board. And likewise, I want to spread the existing board over. And let's see, I need to update the columns, right? So if we go here, I'm not updating anything about the tasks, and I'm not updating the column order. I'm only updating something in columns. So let me go back to the board. So columns. So what I want to update about this is I want to well, I want to just spread everything because I'm not updating all of the columns. I'm just updating one. So board.columns, right? So that copies the existing board.columns and puts it here. And then what I want to do is I just want to update the one column that was changed. So what I can do here is for the key, this will be dynamic. So it will be the new column.id. So here the new column is just the copy of the start, but this has an ID associated with it. So I can do new column.id. And then I want to, what do I want to do? I want to put the new column here. So this part will be the ID. And then this will be the actual column. So I think that's all I need for that. And then once this is done, I can return because I won't need to do anything else. So now let's see if we can update the tasks in a single column. So I'll go here, move that up, it stays, move that down, it stays. But if I try to move this over, it doesn't work. So now let's handle the final case where I'm moving a task from one column to another. So what I can do is I can start by getting the task IDs of the, let's see, how do I want to do this? I want to start by getting the task IDs from the first column. So the column where it's coming from, I need to update those. So I need to remove it. And then for the destination column, I need to get the task IDs there and then put the task in the task IDs there. So if I just go here, or once again, I'm not updating a task, but I'll be updating two columns at once. So first, I need to take the first task IDs and remove one of the tasks from there. And I need to add the same task into the task IDs for another column. So to do that, I'll call this start task IDs. And it's going to be array from and then start task IDs. So remember, I have the two columns, start and finish. And then I can specify a new start. So new starting column. So spread start and task IDs is going to be new task IDs. So I'll just create this in a second, but new task IDs, well, new start task IDs. Okay, like that. So here, this is where I do the, oh no, it's not new, it's just start task IDs. So I'm going to update the new starting column with this. So I'll just call it new start column. How about that? And then here, I'm going to do the splice thing. So start task IDs dot splice. I'm starting from the index. I'm removing one thing. Right? And I don't have to do the other splice here because I'm not updating the same column. So I'm just taking something from this column and I'm going to put it in the next. So that handles the case for the starting column. Now I want to do the same thing for the ending column. So basically it's pretty much almost the same code. So I'll call this finish task IDs. Array from finish.task IDs. And then this time I'll do the splice first. So splice a destination.index. I'm not removing anything, but I'm adding the draggable ID. So the task ID in this case. And then I can create a new finish column. I'm going to spread the finish over. And I'm going to update, what do I want to update? The task IDs again. So task IDs and then finish task IDs, just like that. And then finally, I can update the overall state of the board. So set board. I'll start by spreading the entire board over. And then I want to update the columns. So I'll go in there. And I'll spread over the existing columns for the board. And now I'll update the two things that I need. So I'll use pretty much the same style here. So the square brackets with the ID, but I'm updating two columns instead of one. So I'm going to use the new start column.id. And then I'm going to pass the entire column over. And I'll do the same thing for the new finish column.id. and then new finish column, just like that. And I believe that's it. And I can just return here, even though it's the end of the function. And if I did that correctly, I should be able to move things from one column to another. So let's move edit video over here, and it stays. Move create video over here, it stays. Publish video over here, it stays, and so on. So the styles are a little bit ugly, but I'm not too concerned with how it looks. I just want it to be visible. But I'm moving things over and it works just fine. And I can move the columns over and everything works. So all of my state is being updated correctly. So now that I have this working, the next thing I want to be able to do is add new tasks and eventually new columns. But let's start with new tasks. So I want to be able to click a button, insert some text, and then it adds a new task to whatever column where I inserted the text. So to do this, I'll create a new component. I'll call it addTask.jsx. And then we're going to import React, and this is going to have an internal state. So use state from React. And then I want to create the function. So function addTask. And return, it's going to return something, and then export defaults addTask. So the way this works is it's basically going to be, this component is going to be two things basically. It's going to be a button and it's going to be an input. And depending on the state, it's going to display just one of them. So by default, it displays the button, but once you click on the button, it displays the input until you put some information in there, and then it basically calls the function to add the task, and then it will go back to the button. So I'll start with that where I can just display the button. So I'll create some state, and I'll call this show new task button, and set show new task button, just like that. Use state, this will default to true. And I'll just create the value state for the input. So use state, this will just start off as an empty string. So here in the return, what I want to do is I want to return the button if show new task button is true. So if this is true, then it returns the first thing. So I'll return a button and I'll just say new. And what am I missing here? I think I need a containing div. So let me just put this div down here. Okay. So I have a button new, and then I'll have an input type text. And I'll put the value is equal to value here, the state value. Yeah, so basically what this does is if this is true, it displays a button. If this is false, then it displays the input. So I should be able to add this now. So I'll go to my column and I'll import this. So import addTask. And I'm going to add it to the bottom of my task list. So I'll put it under the placeholder. Yeah, so I'll put it under the placeholder. I'll put add task, and this is going to need the board eventually. So I'll pass the board, and I think I need to pass the board to the column as well. But I'm going to update the state of the board when I add a task, so I need to pass that. So we can say board equals this is going to be props.board because I need to pass this a column as well. And then set board is going to be props.setBoard. I need to pass that. And I can also pass the column ID because I know I'll need that. So column ID equals, where's the column ID? props.column.id. Yeah. So let me move this over here. And I need to pass the board state. So I'll go to board and I'll just go to my column here. And I'll pass the board. So board equals board. and set board equals set board. Okay, so that should be enough. Let me save the column and then this. Okay, so I should be able to see the button. Yeah, so I see the button here. So if I just click new, nothing happens. So now I want to set up the state change when I click on the button. So here on the button, I'll just create a function. So we'll say on click. This will be set show new task button to false. Right? So I think that's it. So if I go here, click that, yeah, it turns into an input. And then for this one, I want to set the on change. So on change, we can say this is going to be an E for the element. So E, and what do I want to do with the E? I want to set the value to be e.target.value. Okay, so that should handle the internal state for the input. And then I want to do something when I'm done typing the new name of the task. So what I'll do is I'll have an on blur here, on blur, and I'll define a new function. So we'll call this, let's say handle input change, and then I'll create it up here. So function handle input change. And what I want to do in here is I want to, I think this takes an event as well. What I want to do is I want to set the show button back to true. So the input goes away. So set new show button, set show new task button to true. So it goes away. I want to update the value to be blank. And then here I'm going to actually update the board. But for now, I'll just alert the value so we can see what I typed in, just to make sure everything works. So now let me try this. So I'll hit new and I'll just say new task. Okay, so on blur, I see new task here, and then the button appears again. So that's exactly what I want. So now I need to create the function to actually update the state so I can use that new task. So this is going to be add new task. Right? It's going to take in a column ID, and it's going to take in, what else is going to take in? It's going to take in the actual content. Right? So what I'll do is I'll state that there, and then I can say props.column ID, and then this is going to be the value. So actually I need to set the value to blank after this. So I'll just put that there. So now I can update this. So now we're going to be dealing with a couple of things. So let's just go back to the data. So I'll be adding a new task here since I'm creating a new task. But also I'm going to update one of the columns to have this task. I'm going to append it to the end of this array, assuming it was column 1. It can be this one as well or any other column. So let's start with the tasks first. So I want to create a new task. So go here. You see they have IDs. What I'll do is I'll just generate a random number for this ID. So go back to add task. So const new task ID is going to be the string task dash, and then I'll just pick a random number. So I think I can do math.random and then multiply that by like 100,000 or 1,000,000 or something. So it gives me like a large integer, and then I'll take the floor of this. So let me wrap that. So math.floor. Yeah. So this could mess up if I have a bunch of tasks. But given how large this is, you probably need to have like thousands of tasks before you have to worry about there being an overlap in task IDs. So this isn't truly unique, but for our purposes, it is. I just want to keep it simple doing this. So I have the new task ID. Now I want to get the existing column. So column equals, I think props.board. Yeah, props.board. .column, and I want to get the board associated with the column ID. And then I want to get the task IDs for that. So new task IDs. This is going to be a copy. So array dot from, and then I'll take the column and then get the task IDs from that column. So task IDs. And then all I need to do is push that new task ID onto this new task IDs array. So new task IDs dot push, and then new task ID, right? So just looking at the data again, I'm pushing the new task ID onto this array here. So now I want to work on adding a new task. So I'll just create the new task object. And this is going to have an ID. So it's going to be the new task ID. And then it's going to have some content, which is just the content from the argument here. So now I need to finally update the state. So props.setBoard. Okay, so first I'm spreading over the entire existing states. And I need to update the tasks first. So tasks. And I'm going to spread over the existing tasks. So props.board.tasks. And now I want to deal with the column ID or the task ID that I just created. So I use the square brackets. So new task ID. And I want to set that equal to the new task that I just created above. So that should be it for the tasks. And then for the columns, so columns, I want to spread the existing columns. So props.board.columns. And then inside of here, I'm going to update one of the column IDs. So I have the column ID. So column ID. And I'm going to update. Well, first I want to spread the existing things about that column because I'm not updating the ID. So props.board.columns, and then the column ID. And then finally, I want to update the task IDs for that column. So task IDs is going to be equal to this new task IDs array that I created here. So I think this is it. So this should be it for adding a new task. So let me go over and let's just try this. Refresh. New task, blur. I get an error, so props.board column is undefined. Let me just go here, props.board.column. Let's see. Yeah, it should be columns instead of column. So let's try that again. So new task, blur. Items is undefined. So let's go back. Where's items? Where's this cleaning items? Oh, okay. I think I know. I'm not passing anything here. So add new task. Yeah, I need to actually, well, am I? Like value, props ID. And looking at this, I think it's task IDs instead of task. And really, I want this to be, input complete. I think that's a better name. So handle input complete. Now let's try this again. So new task. Let's try opening the console. So test. Nothing happens there. So let's see. So add new task. This is getting passed. So I'm passing the information. I have set board. Let me make sure it's being passed properly. So set board is there. And then set board is there. So everything looks fine there. And let me just look at this to see if it works well. So props.board. I'm taking the task and I'm updating the list of tasks. What I can do is every time I update, I can just console log the board so I can see what it looks like. So what I'll do, actually, I'll update it here. So you can do console.log props.board. So we can make sure it's firing first. So yeah, it's firing down here. And then we have the tasks, but it doesn't create the new one. Well, actually, it is creating the new one. So let's see. So I have this task 82 or 84 to start with, 84. That's the content. So it is appearing in the tasks. But if I look at columns, the task IDs aren't being updated. So that tells me where I need to look. So here in the states, we have the column ID. We want to update the task IDs. So we're getting the task IDs from the column. So column.task IDs. Then we're pushing the new task ID here, singular. And then we're creating a new task. So we know this part works because we just saw it. So inside of columns, I'm spreading the existing columns. And then I'm looking for the column ID. So the column ID is there. And I'm spreading the existing information for that column ID. So props for column ID and the task IDs. Oh, this has an S in it as well. So let's try this now. So tests. Okay, there we go. So it looks like it's working now. So just some typos, and I can move this around because it works just like any other task. Move it over, do that. Yeah. Let's go back over. And the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to add a column. So basically it's going to be very similar to this, but instead of adding a task, it's going to be adding a column. So let me take away this console.log and I'll create a new component called add column. So add column.jsx, and then I'll import React and use state from React. I'll create the component. So add column. I'll export this. Okay, and then inside of here, it's going to be very similar to add task. So it's going to be a button. So really I can just copy this. You know, thinking about it, this can be the same thing. This can be like the same component and it can have a flag saying if it's for tasks or columns, but I'll just create a new component. So new column here. And instead of new task button, this will be new column button. And then handle input complete. Okay, so no reference to task here. And then I need to create the state. So this will be show new column button. And set show new column button. Use state. This starts off as true. I need the value and set value for the input. Starts off as an empty string. Okay. And then I'll create the function to handle the change. So I called it handle input complete. Inside of here, I'm going to set the button to, true again. And then I'll set the value to be the empty string again. And then here I'll have the add new column function. And I don't need to pass in an ID for anything. I just need to pass in the value, which is going to be the new title. Right. So add new column title. And inside of this title, or not inside of the title, inside of the add new column function, I need to basically update the state to reflect having the new column. So this time I'm dealing with the column order and then I'll be updating the columns. So first thing I want to do is I want to get the existing column order. So new column order equals array.from and then props.board.column order. Of course, I'll have to pass this, but I need to use the component somewhere. So I'll pass the board and the set board to this. So I have the new column order. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a new column ID. So I'll just copy the code that I have here because it's going to be the same. So copy that. And instead of task ID, this will be new column ID. And instead of task, it will just be column. Okay. And I just want to push that onto the new column order. So new column order dot push new column ID. Now I need to create the actual column object. So I'll call this new column. And the ID is going to be new column ID. The title is going to be the title from the parameter. And then the task IDs will start off as being empty because I'm creating a new column. It won't have any tasks in it. So after this is where I can update the state. So props.setBoard. And I want to spray at the existing board. So props.board. And then I want to update the columns. So columns, spray at the existing column. So props.board.columns. And then I want to add a new column. So new column ID is going to be equal to it's going to have the new column. Okay, so I think that's it for columns. And finally, I want to update the column order. So column order down here, and then new column order. Okay. So I believe that's it. I have the on blur already. So now I just need to put this somewhere. So on the board, I'll import the add column. And I will put this, let's see. Where's a good place to put this? I want to put it at the top of the board. So I'll put it outside the droppable, but inside the context. So add column. And then I need to pass in the board and the set board. So board equals board and set board equals set board, just like that. And then it should appear. So let's take a look. So yeah, here I have the new column button. I click it and I see show new column button is not a function. So that's easy to fix. Add a column. So show new column button. Okay, so it's set show new column button, just like that. Now I can do this, new column, blur. Once again, it fails, so task IDs is undefined. So let's take a look here. Task IDs is undefined. Where does it get task IDs from? Add column, task IDs. Wait, where's that failing? Column.task IDs. We're returning this. I'm thinking this happens somewhere else because this is dealing with the column order. Well, actually, I can kind of see. It doesn't have the task ID for the particular column. So, okay, I think that makes sense. So the new column ID is here. I'm pushing it onto the... So let's see. Let me just make sure everything is okay. So I have the existing column order, and I'm putting it inside of this new column order variable. And then I'm generating the new column ID, and I'm pushing it onto this, right? So then column order. Like, do I have that defined correctly? Column order. Let me just go there. Yeah, that's fine. So we have the board. We're spreading the board, and then for the columns, spreading the existing columns, and then new column ID, new column, column order equals column order, new column order. Yeah, that looks like it's fine, but for some reason it isn't. And looking more, once again, I have this. Is that the issue? Okay, that wasn't the issue, but that needed to be updated anyway. Did I make that mistake again somewhere else? Task IDs. Yeah, I'm putting the S in the wrong place. So tests. Okay, there we go. So I have the new column test, and now I can move it around, just little typos. But it's created the column, and as we can see, it is updating the state properly. All right, so I have adding new columns and new tasks working correctly. Hopefully I don't make the mistake with the S again. So I'll close these. I don't think I'll need them. And next thing I want to do is I want to be able to remove columns and tasks. So what I'll do here in column is I'll start with the function to delete a column, and then I'll just put the function or the event handler on a particular element somewhere. So inside of column here, I'm going to create a new function. I'll call it delete column. So delete column. This is going to take in the column ID, and it's also going to take in the, do I need anything else? Yes, I need the index of the column because I'm removing it from both the columns. So I can remove it by column ID from the columns, and then I need to remove it by index from the column order. So I need those two things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the, and just thinking about it, there's one other thing I want to do is I want to remove all the tasks for that column. So if I delete a column, not only am I deleting the column, but I'm deleting all the tasks for that column. So yeah, let's start there. Let's delete the tasks first. So what I'll do is I'll get all the tasks. So I'll call this column tasks to make this easier to work with. And I'll get the state of the board and columns, almost made the mistake again, and then column ID. And I want to get the task IDs for that. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to loop over or just map over all these tasks that I have, and I want to update the state of the what is it here? I want to update the state of these tasks. So this is a object and it has multiple tasks. So let's see, what's the best way to do this? So I'm not using an array, so I can't just create a new array. So I need to create an entire new object here. And then this object will only have the things that were in it. So yeah, I know. Okay. So I'm going to call this final tasks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the existing task and I'm going to call reduce. So what reduce does is it's going to basically kind of like a loop over each item in an array. So this is an array. So this is a list of task IDs. So it's going to do something for every item in this array here. But unlike map, so map returns an array. Reduce returns one thing. So reduce is going to return this new object here with the removed tasks. So what I want to do is for reduce, I know it takes a previous value and a current value. So previous value and current value, right? And then it takes a function to execute for each one of those. And it can also take a starting argument. So what I want to do is I want to start with the existing tasks. And it's going to put that into previous value. So just to verbally explain how this works, I have these column tasks, right? So it's a list of task IDs. And once again, I made the mistake here. It's task IDs. So I'm going to be doing something for every task ID that I want to remove from the tasks. So what that's going to do is for the first iteration, if I didn't have this, it's going to put the previous value as the first task that I have, and then the current value will be the second task. But imagine if there was just one task, that wouldn't work. So what I need to do is I need to set the initial thing that is the, I think it's the previous value. It's either the previous value or the current value, but the idea is still the same. So basically at the very end, I want to return a new object of tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first thing to return as just the exact state. And then I'm going to update it basically each iteration of reduce. So the way reduce works is you have to return the thing that has the new state that you want. So normally reduce is used for things like adding. So imagine you had a list of numbers, like a list of 10 numbers, and you want to reduce them to a single sum. So you're just going to take each number and add it to some sum that starts off as 0. So like if the first number is 1, you add 1. First number is 5, you have 1, which is the return value from the first iteration of reduce. You're going to add 5 to it. and it becomes 6, and this gets returned. And then in the next iteration, you're going to add the next value to 6. So it basically takes a value and it just returns it, and it updates it as it goes down the list. So here, I'm just saying the first return value is going to be the tasks that I have already. And then what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take out things from that. So to take out things from that, you have to use some tricky syntax. So what I want to do is I want to get the current value. So yeah, the current value is going to be the ID of the task that I'm interested in. And I'm going to call this old task. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to get the old task out of the previous value. So the previous value is the return value of the previous, basically, iteration of reduce. So this is the starting one. So this is the complete task object here. So complete task object. So imagine it has 3 tasks already, and I'll go back to column. So it starts off as this. So now inside of here, I'm taking out the tasks that I don't want, because this column task has the ones that I don't want. I'm taking it out and I'm just calling it old task. So it's looking for the current value and it's going to put it inside of old task when I use these curly brackets. And then I want to get everything else. So I can use the rest operator, which is 3 dots, and I can call this new tasks. And then I can return new tasks. So what's happening here is it's taking the old task out, and then it's giving me all the rest of the task in new task. So previous value is the thing that's being taken out of, right? So I'm taking the old task out of previous value, which is tasks, and I'm taking the rest of everything in there and just returning that. So this becomes the new value. So after the first iteration of this, this will be the tasks minus the first task in the columns. And then it just does this for every loop. And then when it's done, it will return the new task into the final tasks here. So that was a lot to say, but that's how you get it to work. This is basically the trickiest code. When it comes to removing things, it may have been a bit easier with an array, but it would have been really difficult for all the update stuff. So it's kind of like a trade-off. But here it's really only a couple of lines, so I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's too confusing once you get used to the syntax. So now that I have the tasks, now I want to get the columns and update that. So that's going to be a little bit easier. So columns, props.board.columns, and const, what do I want to do? And this is going to be similar. I want to take out the old column and just leave the new columns. So column ID, and then we'll call this old column. So I'm just taking out the old column, and then I want the rest of the columns to be in a variable called new columns. And this is taking from the columns that I just created there. And then I need the new column order. So new column order should be equals, and then array.from, and then props.board.column order. And basically with this, I'm just splicing out the old column. So new column order dot splice, and I want to start from the index. So that's why I have index, and I want to remove one thing. And now that I have all those, I can update the state. So props dot set board will spread the, well, actually, I don't want to spread the existing board because I'm updating everything. So I'm updating the tasks, I'm updating the columns, and I'm updating the column order. So I don't have to spread the original one. So task will be spreading final tasks here. And then columns will be spreading the new columns. And then finally, the column order will be the new column order. Okay, and I think that's it. So now I just need this delete column to get run for a particular thing. What I want to do is I want to put like an X on the title. So here, let me spread this to multiple lines. So I'm just going to put like an X, so a span X, and let's just put a space there. And what I'll do is on click, I'm going to, on click, I'm going to call that function. So I'm going to call delete column. And I'm going to pass in the column ID first, and then the index, which is props.index. Right, so I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't make the mistake with the S's again. So I'll run that. If I click on the X, it goes away. Perfect. And then if I click on the X there, it goes away. If I create a new column in progress, we see I can create a new column again. It has no tasks, and then done. Create that. I can move them around, and then if I click X, it goes away. So the delete column functionality is working. So now I want to do something similar for tasks. I want to be able to delete tasks. So I know I'm going to need to update the state of the board. So I'll pass this to the task component. So board equals props.board, and then set board is equal to props.setBoard. So I know I'm going to need that inside of task when I do the delete task. So here inside of task, I can do something similar. So function delete task. And for this, I want this to be, well, let's see. I need the column ID because I'm deleting from a particular column. I need the index and I need the task ID. Maybe I should put, no, index task ID is fine. Okay, so I need those three things. And then what I want to do is I want to start by getting the column. So const column equals props.board.columns, and then column ID. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to get the task IDs from that column. So I'll create new task IDs. So new task IDs equals props.board, or not props, I have a column here. So array.from column.task IDs. Okay. And then I want to remove the task ID from that column. So new task IDs dot splice. We're splicing at the index and removing just one thing. Okay, so now I want to update the tasks object. So I can do const task equals props.state.tasks. Okay. And then I'm going to remove the task using the same trick. So I'm going to take the task ID, and this is going to be the old task. So old task. And then I'm just using the rest of the task IDs that are left over and calling it new tasks. So I'm taking it out of tasks. And then I need to update the state. So props.setBoard. So I'm going to spread over the existing board because I'm not updating everything. So props.board. And then I want to update the tasks and spread the new tasks here. Yeah, so new tasks is here. And then finally, I want to update the columns. So columns, I want to spread the existing columns because I'm only updating one. So props.board.columns. And then I want to update just the one column ID. So I'll take the column ID here. It's going to be dynamic. And I want to spread the old column. So column. And then I want to update the task IDs for that column. So task IDs, and it will be new task IDs. Right, so that should be it for deleting a task. So now I just need to put this somewhere, and likewise, I'll just put like a little X. So I'll do span X, and then inside of here, it's going to have on click. And it's going to be delete task. And then I'm passing in the column ID. So props.column ID. I'm passing in the index. So props.index. And then I'm passing in the task IDs. So props.task.id. And that should be it. So let's see if this works. Okay, so back to the original state. If I click on the X for publish video, it fails. Props.state is undefined. let's see, I think I called it state instead of board. I need the board state. So let's try this again, delete that, and it works. So I didn't make that other mistake, and I'm able to create one, test, move it over here, click the X. I know this is ugly, but I'm not really focused on the styles. Click X, X, X. So I'm able to delete everything there, can delete the columns as well. Okay, so we've been working on the front end for a while. Now let's go back to the back end because I want to be able to save this state to the back end. So when the user comes back, it's there. Because right now what happens is when I do things like I can delete a column and then refresh and it just loads again. So I want to save this information into a database. So I need to go to the back end and start working there. So let me go to my main.py. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pydantic model. So this will be my schema for the data. So let's start with that. That way, when I send the data over to the backend, it can kind of validate it, and then I can use that to put it inside the database once I convert it back to a JSON. But we'll get to that part in a few minutes. But let's start off with creating the model. So from pydantic import base model. So we're just creating a model of this. So this is going to have a few things. So let's put it under here and let's just look. So let's start with a task. So what does it mean to have a task? So class, task, and then base model, right? So what are the things in a task? So normally we would have like some fixed key, like ID, content, like you see here. Well, actually, yeah, I'm thinking of a task, but for the regular task, singular, I do have the ID. So the ID is going to be a string, and then the content is going to be a string as well. Okay, so that's the easy one. So the one I was thinking about was tasks. So task will be a base model as well. So normally the IDs will be fixed. So here the IDs are fixed. So like, or the keys are fixed. So I have ID and content for that one. But for this one, they're not fixed. They can just be anything. That ID is randomly generated. So it can be anything. So I can't just say like task one. That doesn't make sense because it can be anything. So to handle this case, you use dunder root. And then you say it's going to be a dictionary with a string, and then the value of the dictionary will be the task that I just created here. So now this means it can be any particular value, and then or any particular key, and then the value will be a task. Right? And I'm going to do the same thing for columns. So let me start with class column base model, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then columns will be base model as well. And I'm going to do the same thing. So roots, and it's going to be a dictionary, and let's see, stir, and then column. Just make sure you're using Python 3.8 or above, I believe, because if you're not, you won't be able to do things like dictionary there. You're going to have to import it from typing. So just make sure you're using the correct version of Python. So let's see, we have tasks, the two columns, and then we need the board, right? Oh, I need the column here. So the column has the ID, title, and task IDs. So ID is a string. Title is also a string. And then task IDs is going to be a list. And then finally, I have the board. So this is the entire board. It's a base model. And this has three keys. So tasks are going to be tasks. Columns are going to be columns. And then finally, column order is going to be a list. Okay, so I just need to do that because when I go to send the data to the backend, this will basically validate that the data is in the correct format. So if I'm missing something, then it will fail because it doesn't match this particular schema that I just defined. So now let's work on the database. So let's start by creating the model first, and then I'll create the actual database second. So what I'll do is I need to import some stuff from Tortoise. So Tortoise is the ORM that I'm going to use to work with my database. So Tortoise, like what do I need? I need fields, right? And then I'm going to need I know I need register tortoise so I can actually connect. So from tortoise.contrib.FastAPI, I'm going to import register tortoise. And then I also want to have a model creator. So from tortoise.contrib.pydantic, import pydantic model creator. And I'll explain what this does when I get to it. And finally, I want to import model. So tortoise.models import model. Okay. Let me switch over to the backend because I'm working here. So now I want to create like a user model. So I'll go underneath the schema here and I'll create a class and I'll call this user. So the user is going to have the information for the board in addition to like the username and the password. So the first thing I need is an ID. So fields and then int field, and I'll say pk equals true. And then I need a username, which will be a character field. And let's just say 50 characters. And then each username is going to be unique. Need a password. And then this will be not password field. This will be fields.character field again. And then let's say 200 characters is the max length. And then finally, I need the board data. So I'll just call this board. And this will be fields.json field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the board data and just put it in a JSON field because the backend doesn't have to modify the board at all. It just needs to store it. So this will be a JSON field. And I want this to have a default. I want this to be that default board. So the default will be tasks is an empty dictionary, columns, an empty dictionary, and then column order will be an empty list, right? So that's going to be my default. And I want to create two pydantic models from this. So I'll say user pydantic because I can't use user again. So user pydantic is equal to pydantic model creator. So I'm going to take this user and create a pydantic model out of it. And I'm going to call this user because I'm going to have two of them. And then I'll call this user in. So this is when they're submitting, when they're first creating a user. So pydantic model creator. And this one is going to be based off user as well. The name is going to be user in to make it different from the first user that I created. I want to exclude read only. So this is for when I'm creating a new user. So the read only field in this case is the primary key. So when I'm creating a new user, I won't have a primary key because it hasn't been created yet. Likewise, I won't have a board. So I can exclude the board. It's just a tuple that I have, a tuple that has the name of the field that I want to exclude. So this will only have username and password. And this is for creating a new user. This is for all the other things that I'll use user for. So next, let's go on to creating the actual database. So let me open up a new tab here. And I'm going to create a Docker Compose file. So touch docker compose.yml. Now open this up. This Docker Compose file will be very simple. I only want a database and something to view the database. So first version, I'll start off with 3.8. I think that's close to the latest. It might not be the latest, but 3.8 is pretty new for the version of Docker Compose. And then I'll define the services and I'll have a database and the image is going to just be a Postgres image. And I'll put restart always. And this will have a volume. So I'll define the volume here. And the volume that I want is, I'll just say PG data. Right? And then the location that needs to be is /var/lib/postgresql/data. That's where everything is stored. And let me indent this better. So, okay. So volumes, and then I need the environment. So environment, this is where I'm going to define the password. So Postgres password is going to be password 1. This is the password I use for all my testing because it's easy to remember. And then ports, I want to allow the I want programs outside of the environment that Docker Compose creates to access my database. So I need to open up the port. So 5432 is the port for Postgres. So 5432. And then that's it for Postgres. And then I want adminer, which is something I can use to view the database. So image is adminer. The restart will be always again. And then the ports for adminer are, 8080, I believe. Yeah, 8080. Then I'll just set this volume to use my PG data that I just created there. So PG data, and then I think that's it. So just looking at this, I think everything's fine. So what I want to do is I want to just start this up. So Docker Compose up. And let me open up a new terminal because sometimes it just doesn't work in here. So Docker Compose up. Yeah, it doesn't work in VS Code for some reason for me. So I'm just waiting for this, and once it's done, I'll connect to the database and we can see it working. Okay, it looks like it's working now. So let's see if we can connect. So I'll just go to port 8080. Change this to Postgres. My username is just Postgres by default. My password is password1. Log in. Okay, so we see I have my database. So right now we have no tables. So now we're going to use that register tortoise function to connect to the database. So I can close this. And let me just close that one. I won't need that one. So here on the Python one, register tortoise. So I can just put this at the bottom of the file. So register tortoise, and it takes in a few things. I need to pass in the app object. Then I need to pass in the DB URL. So in this case, I'm connecting to a Postgres database. So Postgres : // and then the username is Postgres. The password is password1. Normally you would put this in an environment variable, but for simplicity purposes, I'll just put everything here. It's on my local host, port 5432. And then the name of the database is Postgres. And I need to set the modules. So the models are in this file here, main. And then generate schema. So I can actually add it to the database. And then we can say add exception handlers is true if there are any errors. So save that. So now that I saved it, the server restarted and it ran this code. So it should have created the table in the database. So let's take a look. So if I refresh this, I see I have the user table. I click on user table, and now we see I have the ID, the username, password in the board. So now this table is in the database, and I can start working on it. And what I'll need to do is, before I can even create users, I'm going to work with like a dummy user. So I'll just create a user here. So new item, IDs auto increment. Username will be test, and the password will be tests, and then the board will be the defaults. Can I do it here? No, I need to just copy the default here. So this is default defined in the code. So I'll just paste that there, and I think that should be enough. Yeah, so I have the username, the password, and the board. This password is eventually going to get hashed, but for now, this is fine, and we see the ID is 1. So what I want to do now is I want to return the board data from my single user. So what I'll do is I'll just get rid of this board data because I no longer need it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first get the user. So I'm going to take I'll create a variable called user, and I'll await. So tortoise is async. So I'll await user.get ID equals 1. So the ID in the database was 1 for that user I just created. And instead of passing board data, I'm just going to pass user.board. So I can save that, and we see await outside of async function. I just need to make this async. Let's run that. My front end is still running. So now if I go over here, refresh, I get nothing. The reason why I get nothing is because I have nothing in the database. So if I edit this, and I create a column. So the column, let me just copy what I just had. So let me just undo. Okay, so I'll just copy column. I'll put column 2 in there. And then I'll redo to get back to where I was. So async. Okay. So let me go over to the database now. And here I'll paste in that column 2. No tasks for now. And I'll save it. And it's not in the right format. I think I have an extra curly bracket there. Is it? Like it's hard to see with this formatting. So columns, there's no thing there. Okay, so columns, I have the key. No, there is one there. Okay, so curly bracket, column 2, and then it has an ID. Oh, it has the single quotes instead of double quotes. So let me update that. Double quote, double quote, double quote. Because this is JSON. JSON doesn't like single quotes. So let me just change all these to double quotes. And then is that good enough? Okay, so I have, see the closing one, closing curly. This is so hard to see. So ID column 2, title done. Oh, task IDs. Let me just move this so I can see it. So we have the ID, we have the title. Title should be done. We have the task IDs, and then we're closing that. Yeah, that should be everything. So tasks is empty, columns is this, comma. Oh, no comma after that. Okay, I mean, how many mistakes are in here? So we have task IDs. So title, done, task IDs. And then the closing, well, the empty list, the closing curly bracket, and then closing curly bracket there. So the input string ended unexpectedly. That kind of suggests that there's a missing quote somewhere. So let me just go back and view that again. Okay, so let me paste the new one directly underneath and I can compare. So we have task, columns, and we have the column object, right? And the task IDs. We have the column order. Okay, so let me remove the column order. Because all that's the same to the comma, right? And I can remove the task IDs. Okay. And then we have columns. So I can remove the columns. And we have the object here. So column 2. I think I'm missing that extra one there. So after the task IDs, I'm closing the column object. I'm closing the column 2 object. So now let's paste that in there and see. Still doesn't work. Let me just cheat and then do this. So I'll paste that in there. Doesn't work. So columns, it's complaining about columns. So let me just make this look better. I don't know why this is so hard to see. So we have columns, which is a dictionary, right? And then we have column 2. Still columns is not, oh, I have 2. Okay, there we go. And so now I should be able to paste that in there and save. Okay, that took longer than I expected, but now I should have a single column, column 2 called done. So when I reload the page, that doesn't work. Let's see. We have column 2. We have the ID, we have the title, and we have task IDs. Okay, so now let's see why this isn't working. So here we're getting user ID 1. Let's go to the Swagger and get the board here. Okay, so I'm getting the columns. I have column 2, ID column 2. And let me see if there's anything on the front end that I'm missing. So board is where I get it. And oh, I know what it is. I'm missing the column order. So if I go back here, the column order should be column 2. Yeah, because I need the column and the column order. Now if I do this, okay, there we go. Kind of want to do more tests, but I don't want to deal with the formatting. So we'll just have to assume that it's working. Like as long as the format is okay, then React is going to bring it in just fine because I'm not changing anything on the React side. Let's go back to the code. And now that I have this, so now that I'm able to get the board, I want to be able to save the updated board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new endpoint for saving the board. So apt.post, same endpoint but different method. We're going to have async def and then save board here. And what I want to do is I want to get the first user. So user awaits user get ID 1. And then I want to, I know what I want to do is I want to get the board. So the board is going to be board. So this is going to take the board from the request data, convert it to our board model there, and then return it as board. So I can say user.board equals board.json, right? Because this is going to be a Python object. I need to convert it to JSON. And then I can await user.save. And I can return like status is success. How about that? Right? So let me test this out in Swagger first. So did my server restart okay? Yeah, it did. Let me go to Swagger and then I'll just refresh this. And okay, so what I can do here is first I'll get the board. So try it out, execute, get. So I'll just copy this. I know this is the correct format. Well, actually, it's just this inside of board. So that's the correct format. And then I'll go over here and try this out. And I can edit this. I can paste this in. And now what I can do is I can change the name. So instead of done, I'll change this to to-do. Execute, I get success. And now when I run this, I get to-do. And now because I'm dealing with this, it's a little easier to add things. So what I'll do is I'll add a task ID. So task 1. And then in the task here, I'll create a new task ID. So this will be task 1. And then I need the object. So the ID will be task 1 again. And then the content will be create video. Right? So let's execute this. Get success again, run this, and now we see create video. Okay, so now it's working just fine. So now I'm able to get the data from the database for a particular user, and I'm able to save the data to the database for a particular user. So now what I want to do is I want to update the front end to basically call this save every time something on the board changes. So let me go over to the front end again. So let me go to the front end terminal here. And then I think I need the board. Yeah, I need the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically save the state of the board every time the board changes, right? So I'm going to use effect. So the first thing, I don't think I need any arguments. So the first argument to use effect will be a function, which I'll define in a second. The second argument will be an array of things that this will fire on. So I want to have this update every time the board changes. All right, so every time the board changes, this will execute. And what I want to do is I'll define a function called SaveBoard. Right, and it's going to be similar to fetchBoard in the sense that's an async function. So async function SaveBoard. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to call the API and I'm going to pass the data that I'm working with. So we can say const response equals waits fetch and then slash board. Then I need to pass in some additional information here. So I want to pass in the method. So the method's going to be post. I need some headers. So this is going to hold the content type header, and eventually it's going to hold the token as well. But for now, just the content type. So application/JSON. And then it needs the body. So the body is going to be the stringify version of the board state. So just board. And then I can close this and then, well, actually it's underneath. And then I can also wait for the data. I'm not going to do anything with the data, but if you want to have some error checking, you would just add it here. So this will return that success thing. And I'll return, really I don't have to return anything because it's just a post. But if you wanted to do error checking, you can do it. You can do it down here. Okay, so SaveBoard, post is not defined. This should be a string. Okay. So now let's see. I think this should be it for getting it to work. So I have the user effect, SaveBoard. I'm calling SaveBoard. So now let's go over to the app. Okay, so if I just delete one thing and refresh, it's gone, right? If I look in the database, refresh, we see that there's no task ID. If I delete this, it should save, refresh this. Now we see I'm back to where it begins. And if I look at that, I get nothing. So let's modify this and we can see if I get all the things saving correctly. So to do is a column, in progress, and done. Right? So create video, edit video. Okay, so now if I refresh this, we see I have two task IDs. Let's see if I can make this bigger. It's kind of hard to see, but I have two tasks. So one for create video and one for edit video. I have the columns, a couple columns. I have the column orders. And then if I refresh this, it just loads again. So now I'm able to save everything. If I rearrange it, it should fire again. We see to do is over there. Rearrange this. I should see, it's kind of hard to tell because these are just random numbers, but this should be reordering and everything is saving properly. So this one is 153. Refresh this. Yeah, so everything looks good in terms of the data saving. I can refresh the page and it doesn't start from the very beginning because now I'm pulling from the database. So now that I'm able to save the data to the database onto a certain user, and I'm able to grab that data from the database for a particular user, now I want to implement the user system. So I want to be able to create new users so I can have a user log in, modify a board, they can then log out, and then another user can log in, modify the board, and then they're not going to interfere with each other because each user has their own board. So we can start by, let's see, where should I start? So I know I'm going to convert something to JSON Web Tokens. So let me go back to the backend because this is where most of the stuff is going to happen for creating a user, at least initially. So I know I can set a secret for my JSON Web Token. So my jot secret. Once again, this will usually be an environment variable, but just to keep things simple, I'm putting it there. And then what I want to do is I want to, let's see, what do I want to do? Let's start with creating a user. So I'll go down to my endpoints and I'll create a new one. So app, posts, and then users. So what I want to do here is I want to create a new user. So async def define create user. And this is going to take in the user in thing that I created here. So user in Pydantic. So I'll just say user in and then user in Pydantic, just like that. So this is going to be all the data that they pass to me, which will be the username and password. So what I can do is I can create a new user based off that. So user equals the user model, and I can have the username equals user in dot username, and then the password is going to be the hash of that. So let me go ahead and import bcrypt from hashlib or from passlib. So to keep it in alphabetical order, I can say from passlib import bcrypt. And I also know I need JSON Web Tokens. So at the top here, I'll import that. So let me go back down to here. So the password, I need to hash it. So I'm going to take that bcrypt and call hash on it. And I'm just going to take the password that the user passed in. So it gets hashed. And then I'm going to await user.save. So it gets saved to the database. And then what I want to do is I want to take that user object and get the Pydantic object from it. So I can say user, let's call this user object equals await, and then user Pydantic dot from tortoise ORM, and then user. So what this is going to do is it's going to take a tortoise object and convert it to a Pydantic object. And I'm just saving it as user object. And then I want to create a JSON Web Token based off this. So we can say token. Token is going to be jot.encode. And then I want to take the user object, convert it to a dictionary. And then the secret is the second argument. And then I just want to return this token. So return access token is token. Right? So I'm going to return that. Can't import bcrypt from passlib. I think this is passlib.hash, not bash, but hash. Okay, so that works. So now I should be able to test creating a user. So let's see. Let's go to Swagger, refresh, close this one and this one. Let's see, where is it? I'll refresh. Okay, so create user. So try it out. So I'll create a user. Let's say Swagger user, and a password. I could just leave it a string because it's going to get hashed. So execute. I get an error. So let's see what this error is. The local name was referenced before assignments. So here, oh, this should be user in for the password hash. So let's go back and try that again. I could just execute again. Okay, so now I have an access token. So this is the token that I'm going to use for authentication later, but I have the access token. And now if I go back to my database, I have Swagger user, and we see that the password has been hashed. We see that they have the default board, which is just empty, and everything is working correctly there. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to log in with this user. So I can create a new user, which is great, but I want to also be able to log in with that user. So let's see, how can I do this? I'll create a helper function to log in first. So I'll put it up here at the top after this stuff. So my helper function will be authenticate user. And it's going to take in a couple things. It's going to take in a username, which will be a string, and it's going to take in a password, which is also a string. So first thing I want to do is I want to get the user. So await user.get, and then username equals username. So I'm getting the user. If not user, I want to return false, meaning that the user isn't authenticated. And then if not user dot And I want to do some password checking. So what I can do is on the user model, I can define a helper called verify password. So we'll say verify password self, and then it's going to take in the password. And then what I want to do here is I want to return bcrypt verify. So bcrypt.verify. And I'm taking the password that was passed in and comparing it to self.password. So this will return true if this gets hashed and it's an equivalent hash to the one that's stored in the database. So let me go back down to, where was it, that authenticate. So verify password. So if this is false, just return false. And then finally, I can return the user object if everything works fine. So now I'm going to create another endpoint, and I'll call this token. So posts on token. So this will get me the token. And then I'll call this generate token. And what I want to do is I want to have a form available for OAuth 2. So I could just pass in like the username and password, but FastAPI has some stuff built in for handling just this case. So what I'll do is I'll go to FastAPI, and I think it's, so I need from security. So from FastAPI.security, there are two things that I want to import. So I want to import OAuth 2 password bearer. I'm not going to use that first. I'll use that later. And then OAuth 2 password request form. And I'll show you what this does in a moment, but there's a specific reason why I'm doing this. It's because on Swagger, it makes it very easy to use. And then up here, I want to import depends. And I also know I need an exception and status. So I'll just import those as well. So I want to take this request form, and I want to go down to my token. And I'm basically going to say that in my token, I have some form data that I'm passing in. So this is going to be the username and password, and it depends on this OAuth 2 password request form. So for depends, I just do equals depends, and it's an empty call right there. So what this is going to do is it's going to take in the data from this request form, and we'll see the form in just a moment. It's going to put it in form data. And then what I want to do is I want to authenticate this user. So awaits authenticate user. So form data.username, and then form data.password. And then if not user, so if I can't authenticate, I just want to raise an exception. And I don't think I'm going to do much error handling, if any at all, in the front end. But it's going to be very easy to do because I'm returning the error codes here. So if something doesn't work, then you can add the exception handling here. This video is already pretty long, so I just want to focus on the core functionality. So I'm returning, let's say unauthorized. So status dot HTTP 401 unauthorized. And then I can pass a detail, invalid user name or password. Okay. So if I do get a user, what I want to do is I want to create the user object, the Pydantic object. So I can await user Pydantic dot from tortoise RM, and then the user. Now basically have the same code that I have here, so to generate the token, so it's exactly the same. And then I'll return that, so I can copy this as well because it's going to be the same. Okay, so from this should be import. Okay. So let's go over here. Let's go to Swagger. Let's refresh. And the reason why I did that is when I go to generate token here and try it out, like I have these fields, but this isn't exactly what I want. Well, first, let me just verify this. So I think the name of the user was Swagger user. So Swagger user, and then string was the password. So if I execute, I should get a token in response. and I do. And if I just make it like incorrect, so instead of string, I just put an extra G on there, then I get an error. The error is because of the raise. So unexpected keyword status. Is it status or is it status code? Let me try that. Execute. Okay, yeah, so now we see invalid username or password. So if I put it back, I have the correct string. So this is all working properly. And the reason why I want the form is because I don't want to put it on there yet, but basically I can make the board. I can make the board so I have to log in first, and then I can get the board data for the particular user that I log in as. But we'll see that later. But for now, I'm able to generate the token. So now the last thing I want to do is I want to create like the get current user function. So this is also a helper. So async def, and then we can say get current user. So based off of the token, which is a string, and this depends on the OAuth 2 scheme. So I need to define OAuth 2 scheme here. So OAuth 2 scheme is an object. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the bearer and it's going to set what the token URL is. So this is for Swagger. So token URL is going to be token, right? Because I've defined token here. And whenever I use this get current user in depends in like board or, well, both of these boards, I'll have like a little lock that I can log into. So this depends on the OAuth 2 scheme. So I'll just put that there. And then I want to basically try this to see if the token is correct. If it isn't, then I can return an error. So first, we can say the payload is equal to jot.decode, and then I'm taking the token, which I'm getting here, the token, and then I have to pass in the secrets, and then I think I need the algorithm. So algorithm is let's see, let me copy it from somewhere. So algorithm, let me just copy the whole thing because I feel like I'm going to make a mistake with the S again. So algorithms HS256, and then user is going to be await, and then user get, and then I can get the ID of the user from the payload. So payload.get ID, and I can get the user from the payload. And then I have the accept, and I'll just define this in a second, but I want to return await, and then user Pydantic from tortoise ORM and the user, right? So I want to get just a user object from here. And then the exception would be to raise an exception. I'll just raise the same exception here. Okay. So if we get any errors. All right. So to show you what I was talking about, if I do this, so like on the board here, it's going to take in a user, right? And I can say this is going to be a user Pydantic object, and it depends on get current user. So now if I run this, like if I refresh, we see I have this little lock. So if I click on the lock, then this form comes up. So this is what I was talking about with the form. So now I can basically authorize. So Swagger user, and then the password is string. You can authorize and then close this. And then when I run this, it's going to use that user. But for now, it's still grabbing from the database for user 1 because it's hard-coded here. So let me think. Should I do this here first? Yeah, I'll modify it here. It's going to break the front end, and then I'll fix the front end as we go on. Oh, no, I think I'll just get rid of this. So I'll just take that and put it as a comment. So the front end still works so we can see, because if something else breaks on the front end, at least I want to know what it is. So all this here is working the same. And I think that's everything on the back end for the users. So now I need to go to the front end and start working on that again. So now I want to have some routes. I want to have a place to go if I want to log in. I want to have a place to go if I register, and I want a place to go to view the board itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some routes using React router, and I'm going to then create some components to put inside those routes for login and register. And then the board component, of course, will still be there for the main route, the index, I guess. So let me start by importing the stuff from React router. So browser, I think it's browser router. Yeah, browser router. And I know I'm going to need a switch and I'm going to need a route. So this is from React router DOM. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to put, actually I want to do this inside of the index. So index might get a little uglier, but I think it'll be okay. So I'll put this in the index. Yeah, I think it's better to go here. So what I want to do is I want to put the browser router around the board. And then I'm also going to have a switch around the board as well to switch on the different routes that I have. So let me just put this ending switch there. And then I'll put this under and indent it. And the indentation here is different. So I'll just maintain the same indentation. So I have the board inside of the switch and the browser router. So what I want to do now is I want to create a route for this. So I'll create a route and I'll put that around my board. So routes, and then this is going to be an exact match. So path is going to be the index. And then I need the closing route here. Okay. So I'm going to display the board when I'm matching on this path for the router. And then I'm going to have another route for the register and the login, but let me create those components first. So I'll start with the register. In components, I'll create register.jsx, and let me close out the column and the task. I don't think I need them for now. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So React, and then use state. I know I need that from React. Okay, and then we can create the function register props export default register. And then in here, I have the return statement, and I'm going to return something. So what I want to return to start with is just a form. So what I can do is say form, and then I'm going to have a username field and a password field. So username is type input. Let's put some paragraphs around this. So P is going to be username, input, and type text. And then I need a password field. So password. And then you could do like a confirm password, but I'll just keep it simple and just have username and password. And then I'll have the button for register, right? And now that I have that, I can then import this register component, and then I can add the route for register. So first routes, path is going to be /register. And then this is going to be that register component that I just imported, not passing any properties to it for now. And then let's just make sure that this appears. So let me go to my app. So the board still appears for the index. If I go to register, I get the register form. Okay, so that works. And then I can go back to the board. Okay, so everything there is fine. So now let me work on the register the register component. So what I want to do is I want to set up the state first. So I'll have the state for both the username and password. So here const and then square brackets. We have username and set username is equal to use state. And these can just be null. Oh, let's just make them empty since we're dealing with inputs here. And then we have password, set password. And this will be an empty string as well. So I have those two things. So now I can just update the inputs to modify those on change. So on change, we have the event E, and we're going to call set username e.target.value. And I need the same thing for password, so I'll just copy this and just change it to password. Okay, so set password. Okay, so that handles the state for the two inputs. So now what I want to do is I want to have like a handle submit. So we'll say on submit, we'll define a function called handle submit. And I'll define that here. So function handle submits. It's going to have the events. So I want to do prevent default. And then what I want to do is I want to take that data and I want to pass it to a function that will actually send the request. So let me create the function to send the request first. So async def, we'll call this create user. And then I want to get the form data. So form data is going to be equal to username is the username state value. Same thing for the password. And something went wrong here, missing semicolon. Missing semicolon. Where's it missing? Oh, this is not Python. This is JavaScript. That should be function. Okay. So create user. And then I want to send a request. So we'll say response is equals to await fetch. And then we're going to slash users, right? So slash users. Yeah, we're sending a post request to slash users. So this will be method post. And then the headers for this will be content type. And then the content type for this one, this is for the register. So this should just be JSON. So application/JSON. And then the body, I can stringify. So JSON.stringify the form data. Okay. And then once I get that, I can do await on response.json. And then I can return that response data. So now inside of here, I can use this. I can await create user. Not await. I'm calling then on create user. So create user that then. Going to do something with the data that gets returned. What do I want to do? So I'm getting a token in response, and I want to set this token on the state, and I also want to set it in my local storage. So I'll do both. So I'm going to have a prop for set token, and I need to set create the state for the token on the index. So I'll do that in a moment. But set token, data.access token, because that's what I'm calling it, right? From here, yeah, access token. So data.access token. And then I want to set it on the local storage so it's always there. So set item, and then I'll just call this token. and then JSON.stringify the same thing, the access token. So then, this should be a function. Okay. And then let's see, data.access token set item. Oh, this should be comma. Okay. So now in here, I can create the state, the token state. So from React, I'll import useState. And then here, I'll say const token and set token is equal to useState. And then the token will be, I think the token will be empty to begin with. Well, really, I need to create a function to get the token out of the local storage. So I'll do that momentarily, but I know I need to pass these props. So props are not props, but set token equals set token, just like that. And another thing I just remembered is in register, what I want to do is I want to return, or I want to move the user to the board after they log in. So from React Router DOM, they have this hook called use history. So use history from React Router DOM, and I can just call that here. So const history equals use history. And this will allow me to redirect the user after they register. So in here, what I want to do is I want to do history.push, like that, right? I think that's that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you just push on the history, then yeah, that will redirect you to the routes here, because I want them to go to the board after they have logged in. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to basically take the token that I have and use that to send requests. So if I go over here, I need to pass the token to the board. So token equals token. And then if I go to the board, what I want to do here, so for example, I have this fetch board. I want to update this so it has the token that I have in the app. So I'll modify this. This is now going to have some additional information. It's going to have the headers. And for the headers, I want to set the authorization to be bearer. And then I'm just going to add the token. So props.token, just like that. And I can do the exact same thing down here. I can just copy this because I'm passing the authorization for this, right? And because I have the token here, I don't want to call this unless there is a token. So if I go back here, what I can do is I can say, like, if there's no token, so if not token, then I want to redirect to register. Really login, but I don't have login yet. So I'll just redirect to register for now. So I'll import redirect. And here, where is it here? If this is true, so if not token is true means there's no token, I want to redirect to /register. And I'll change this later to login. And then if that's not true, if it's false, then I want to render the board, right? So let's see if I can make this look a little bit better. Question mark there. Yeah, I think that looks better. Let's just indent all of this. Okay, so yeah, if there's no token, I want to redirect here. This should be a component. If there's no token, I want to redirect to the register page. If there is a token, then I want to redirect to the board because the board needs the token to perform the request. So let's see if I can get this to work. So first, does it still work? It does. And I can't go to the main page anymore because it doesn't have a token. So it just doesn't allow me to go to the board anymore because there's no token. I have to log in first or register first. And thinking about it, I should create the function for getting the token. Well, no, I don't have to create it yet because I'm going to register and set the token. Okay, so let me go over and register a new user. And if that works, then I'll be able to create the board. So hopefully there are no errors. So username for this one will be Anthony, and then password 1, register. And we see it redirected me. So let me go to my database, go to user, and select data. Okay, so we see we have a user, Anthony, and then the board is empty. Let me delete this one because this is the old one. Okay, so for Anthony, the board is empty. So now the problem here is I'm loading the original board because it's not saving to the to this. So like if I refresh here, like I get nothing, and it's actually going to fail now because I'm not getting the right user. So let's go over to the backend again. Let me just bring that here. So yeah, we see 404 not found. That's because I need that depends. So let me go to main.py and I have a comment. Yeah. So now I can put this inside of here, remove that. And instead of getting ID 1, I'm going to get user.id. And then I can do the same thing here. So just add that and put a comma there. So instead of doing that, the ID will be user.id. So now let's try going over here. So refresh. I restarted everything. So let me register. And now I register, but it doesn't. Oh, it's an error because I already have Anthony. So I'll say React and then password 1, register. Okay, so now we see I created React, and now if I create something, so we see that it starts off as an empty board, so that's correct. And if I say to do and then refresh this for React, we see React now has that to do. And if I add like create video and test, refresh this. Is it refreshing? Okay, it looks like it's not saving. Yeah, so there's a problem there. So it saves the board correctly, like when I first create the column, but it doesn't save the updates for the tasks. So let's see. Unprocessable entity. So this is posting to users, and I think that was the error I got when it wasn't working. So let me see. Let me create a new user. So I have to create a new user until I have like a login system. Well, actually, let me see. If I go here, the problem is it's not getting the token. Yeah, so the problem is I need a function to get the token, like when I refresh the page. So let me just create this get token. So it's going to be a helper. So get token. And what I want to do is I want to first get the token string. So get token string, local storage dot get item token. And then from that, I can get the actual token value because it starts off as a string. So JSON.parse, and this converts it to a JavaScript object. So token string. And I want to return this user token. Right. And then inside of use state, what I'm going to do here is it's going to start by calling this get token. So get token, just like that. Okay. So now I think I can go here. Yeah. Okay. So I have the two things, which is saving correctly. I think I'm just not logged in as the right user, right? So React, no, that works fine. Looks, let me create a new column. So edit video, new column in progress. Okay, so if I refresh this, like, is it my database that's not, is it this adminer? Okay, yeah, that was just an admin error problem. So yeah, it is working, just wasn't refreshing. So yeah, we can see the data here growing as I make changes to this. So now I have register working. Now I want to work on login because it doesn't make sense to have to register every time you get there. So I'm going to create a new component called login. And this is going to be very similar to register. So login.jsx. So I'll just start by copying register. And I'll just update it to be login. So login, and I'll export login down here. And then this should be login. So these things are the same. And then this stuff at the top here is the same. So some of the stuff that's going to be different is instead of create user, I'll call this login user. And then this function is going to be here. And then instead of form data, so when it comes to logging in, like if I go to Swagger, where's the token? So this is like, I'm going to be calling token, right? Okay, yeah. So this is the header or the content type that I need to send. So it should be like a URL parameter kind of thing. So I need to use parameters in React. So instead of form data like this, I can do search params, which is URL params. So search params equals new URL search params. And then I want to append the username and password. So search params.append username is going to be the username from the state. And then search params for the password will be password. And this should be a comma, not a colon. And then I'm fetching token this time, not users. And then I want to do the whole URL thing. So instead of JSON, it's going to be x www.form.url encoded. And the body is going to be search params to string. And I think that's it. So I'm going to get the access token in return. I want to set the token. I want to redirect. Yeah. So that should be fine. So in the index, I'm going to import the login component. And then with the login component, I'm going to create a route called login. I'm going to put this login component in here, set token, just like the register. And I'm going to change this to login instead of register. And now let's see if this works. So if I go over to the app, okay, so let me first remove the token. So let's see, local storage, storage here, and then local storage. I just want to remove this. So if I run this again, it redirects me to the login page because I have no token. So I'm going to log in with, what's my user? Start with React. So React and then password 1, log in, and it takes me to this. So if I log out again, let me just delete that. And then I'll log in with Anthony this time. We see it takes me to the empty board because I have nothing. So let me just show you. Let's just say Anthony for the name of the column. And then I'll log out. I'm going to create a logout link in a moment, but I need to log out here. So I'll go back to React. And we see this, and I'll just edit it, and I'll move everything over here. Okay, and then I'll log out. So this is React. And then with Anthony, I'll log in again. Anthony, we have Anthony here. And then finally, I'll log out and I'll go back to React just to make sure everything is working. So React, and then password 1, log in. Okay, so we see everything looks to be fine. And just thinking about it, like on the board, let's see, this use effect only loads for the first one. I could change this to be for token, but it appears to be okay. So I'll just leave it as it is because it should call for token because it's generating that. But I've had problems with that in the past, but I think it's okay for now. So I'm thinking the last thing I want to do is just have the links for the logout. So for this, I'll create a component called logouts. So logout.jsx. And in here, I'll import React. I don't think I need any state for this. It's just going to be like a link. But import link from React router DOM. And then I want to import use history because I'm going to redirect. This use history should go here. So link and use history, the hook. And I want to create a function called logout because this is a logout component. Takes props. I'm not sure if I'm going to use any props, but I'll just put that there anyway. And then export defaults logout. And then inside of here, I want to return a button. So button on click, we're going to call a logout function. So log, let's say log out user. Just keep it consistent. So logout user, yeah. This on click needs to go inside of the button. And log out. Okay, so I want to create this function called logout user. Doesn't have to take anything. All I want to do is I want to remove the token from the local storage. So remove item. I'm going to remove token. And then I want to push to the login route. So what I'll do is I'll use that hook. So const history equals use history. And then inside of here, what I can do is history.push. And this will be the login route that I want to push to. Okay, so I think everything there is fine for logout. And then I want to put this logout button somewhere on the board. So this is going to be ugly, but I'll put it right next to the add column button. So where's the add column button? I'm not looking in the right spot. Okay, so we have this add column, and I'm just going to put logout here. So logout there, and I imported it, or I haven't. So logout. All right, so let's see if I can log in and log out. Okay, logout not defined. I fixed that. Yeah, so I have the logout button right there. So right now I'm logged in. If I hit log out, it redirects me. If I try to go back, I can't. But if I log in as Anthony again, I can log in. And we see I am now logged in. So I guess the last thing I can do is if the user already has an account, or if they need to create an account, I can set it to create a link to the register page. And if they're already registered, then I can create a link to the logout page. I think that'd be the last thing I do for this. So I'll go to the login component, and from React router DOM, I'll import link, and I'll just put a link underneath the button. So I'll do this. I'll say link to, and I want to link to the register page. And I'll say need an account, register here. Okay, so let's take a look. Yeah, so need account, register here. I click that, it takes me to register. And I'll do pretty much the exact same thing in register. So create paragraph, link. This is going to link to login. And instead of need an account, I'll say already have an account. And I just need to import that link up here. So link And now on the register page, I can go to login page. Login. I think that's kind of ugly. It's too long. Let me just, I mean, everything's ugly, but since I'm working on this, I can do this. So I'll put this outside and I'll do the same thing here. So need accounts. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. So register here, log in here. So now all of that is working. So it looks like everything is working with my Kanban board. If I can type in my password correctly. So yeah, I can add items, create video. Once again, I can create new columns. I can log out and do so many other things. So some things that you can possibly do if you want to extend this. And like I said, you're going to have the code. You can get the code in the description below. But if you want to extend this, what you can do is you can make the styles look a lot better, make it to where they don't just adjust by the size of the item, like it can like wrap inside of it. You can add error handling, and then anything else that you can imagine you can add to this. But basically in this video, I want to focus on the core functionality of creating the board, saving the board, getting the board from the saved user, and so on. So I think that's it. That was a long video, probably my longest video on this channel up until this point. So I hope you made it to this point. If you have any questions about anything that I've done here, leave a comment down below. If you don't like the way I did something, you have a suggestion on how I can do things better, you can leave a comment down below. And like always, if you like this video, click the like button, click the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.